Good evening, everybody. I hope you guys are having an amazing day. Welcome to a special edition of Live with Breathe America. Tonight, we're going to be discussing everything that has happened in Portland over the weekend that we didn't get a chance to talk about the other day. It's interesting when you go to these events and you see these things firsthand. We all have expectations of what we're going to see and what's going to happen. And a lot of times those ideas are completely off base, and you end up seeing things that you didn't expect. So that's one of the things that happened this weekend, I think, on a lot of different levels. For me personally, there was a lot of things that happened that I didn't expect, and there were some things that happened that I probably should have expected. And we're going to dig into those things tonight. With me tonight, I should say, is Mr. Aaron Beach Schaefer. John Lee was supposed to be joining us, but he is dealing with some issues right now, so he was unavailable. So it's just going to be me and Beats tonight, going over what we experienced. So I'm just going to start with you, Aaron, and let's just take the weekend from start to finish. I think that'll be a good way to do it. So we get to Portland late, obviously. We get settled in, and then we wake up early the next morning, and we're all geared towards going to this Proud Boy event. What were your thoughts and feelings going into that event? You're muted, Beats. You're muted.
If we're speaking of just the thoughts of going into that event, I was genuinely scared. Not gonna lie, because of what I researched and what I looked up and what I can find about them, because there really isn't a whole lot on the internet that comes from a trusted source, so to speak. Like, I don't really trust Wikipedia because anybody can go change it, but that's generally where I got most of my information. So the feeling before that was pretty tense. I'd have to say, knowing that there's going to be armed militia there, knowing that there's going to be white supremacists there, me being a person of color. I have to say, first walking into that, seeing the amount of color I did kind of made me feel at ease. There's definitely some points that, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later, that happened during that protest that made me initially start thinking. But initially going in, I was pretty rattled.
Yeah, my initial thoughts going in, I try to go in as neutral as I can. Obviously, I mean, early on, it was called the Proud Boy Apocalypse, and then the descriptions or the things they used to describe it changed as we got closer to it. And honestly, like, I didn't really know what to expect. But as we got off the highway and we pulled a little closer, and I saw the incredible police presence that was there, obviously I started to get a little worried. I started like, wow, okay, there's a lot of police here, and that kind of took me back a little bit. And then, as we got to where we parked and everything else, and, we're seeing a lot of armed citizens. We're seeing all the back entrances to the park are guarded by armed citizens. It was kind of an ominous thing for me. Like, honestly, it's like, okay, what are we really walking into? And we made the decision that the first thing that we were going to do is talk to the police. And we made our way back to where they were, and we just simply asked them what the legalities of us being there, because the permit was, they weren't granted a permit. And so we found out that we were good. Everything was fine. And so we went ahead and headed in. But yeah, definitely leading up to it, there was a lot of apprehensiveness in me, for sure. But as we got closer, and the event got started, the first thing they did was have everybody take a knee and say a prayer. That kind of surprised me.
That made me feel comfortable.
What were your thoughts on that?
That made me feel comfortable. That whole first, like, 10 minutes of being actually up close, I was like, all right, well, maybe these guys really do have something to say. You know what I mean? And so that's when I really started focusing on the people that were talking. And I was actually shocked to see Felipe there. I didn't think he would be there, which he's the main person of the whole thing. Now he took over for I believe that guy's name was Gavin or Galvin
Right.
was his name. I didn't expect him to be there, and he was. So that was pretty cool. There were some things that were said that really pissed me off. You know what I mean? There were some things that actually were done. If you watch the live video, that really pissed me off. That lady had there was a lady in front of me. She wasn't initially in front of me, but as soon as she saw us walking up, she then started making trying to intersect her way into mine, and she finally did. And the first she got, the first chance that she got to do this is she looked back at me and she took her flag and she made sure it drug across my head, and it was a Confederate flag and a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. And it pretty much covered my whole. From what I can see, the video really doesn't do no justice, but it blocked my entire view and then drug over my hat. And I had moved. She'd followed, and then I guess she had tried to do it again, but you could see John move me in between him, and then she stopped. As soon as she saw John stand right there, she stopped. So that was really racist. There's no other way to describe it, and it pissed me off. Sure, it was really hard to hold my composure because I didn't want anybody. Excuse me. I didn't want anybody to know what I was doing. You know what I mean? Even though there was plenty of press there, people marked off as press. I didn't want anybody to know what I was doing. I just wanted to just be a neutral party, just looking, observing, and to get as much really footage as I could. So yeah, it was quite hard to keep composure there.
Yeah. So you were breaking up a little bit on my end, so just in case, I'm gonna reiterate a few things about this. Number one, I did not see this happen because I was actually standing in front of Aaron, and Aaron and John were kind of behind me and more to my right, I believe, at that time. I did see the woman with the flag, with the Confederate flag and the "Don't Tread on Me" flag, and so apparently. And it's on Aaron's live video from there. You can see the flag will rush over his head a couple of times, and she was making a point to basically. I mean, she even moved to be closer because when we walked up, she wasn't anywhere close to us because she was off more to our right side, and apparently she decided to move over so she could wave that flag right in his face. So, and like I said, I did not see it while it was happening, and this was something I learned about after the fact. But back to just the event as a whole, it started out with a prayer, and then the national anthem played as the American flag and smoke and everything, and they had a whole thing going on, right? And then after the national anthem played, everybody said the pledge of allegiance, and then they had a bunch of speakers, right? And for the most part, the speakers were whatever the speakers were. It's really hard when you're there live and you're trying to record it to listen and record and pay attention, and obviously there were some interruptions in the middle of it. And there was a lot going on for sure. And I've had the chance to go back and watch the video and or all the videos and listen to the speakers and things like that. But while I was there, I wasn't seeing anything outside of them chase down somebody who they thought was an Antifa reporter. Now, to be fair, because of what we're going to get into in a little bit, I have had other independent journalists let me know that there were other journalists that were in fact attacked and there were fights on the other side of the protest that we did not, or the event, I should say, that we did not see. I did not witness any of that things, but I have been told that did happen, and several independent journalists were forced to leave and even assaulted in the build up to that. So, or in the middle of it and everything else. One of the things that most surprised me, especially considering the build up though, and maybe Aaron, I'm really curious on your thoughts on this, but when they got word, so after the event was over, everybody was talking, and I was actually talking to the guy that you just brought up, the head guy of the Proud Boys. We were having a conversation, and we were going to go live together and all that stuff. We got interrupted because they were getting word that a large contingency of people were heading that way. The moment that happened, they jumped over, or he went back up and got on the microphone and asked everybody to clean up and to leave, and made it clear that is not why we are here. So even with a chance to, even with a chance for violence, they chose to make it very clear that is not why they were there, and to leave at that point. What did you make of that, Aaron?
At first, and I'm gonna say this and just this, and so it can kind of flow with the weekend. But at first, I was like, all right, that's kind of weird. You know what I mean? And then looked over on the other side of the park. The police weren't there. You know what I mean? And there was just a small group of people. The armed forces were still there. The militia was still there. It was just really weird. I didn't get it. You know what I mean? Because from what I heard and what I've come to research with the Proud Boys is that they are a pretty violent group. That's what is portrayed on the internet and mainstream media, is that they're a violent group. So I was like, why would they just leave? You know what I mean? Is that because there really isn't no clear reason of why Galvin left. So it was just my assumption that he left because they became a violent group, and that's not what he wanted. So at that moment, it was just strange.
Yeah, it didn't really. That was weird. Why are we getting so much feedback?
I don't know. Do you want me to mute?
Yeah, mute for a second. Yeah, we're good now. Come back on, Aaron. Unmute yourself.
Yep.
Check.
Check.
All right, whatever that was, it worked. That was crazy. We're getting some weird stuff. So I thought it was strange as well. It wasn't what I anticipated, and I didn't think that we were going to see that at all, honestly. Now, for all of you guys asking if Bethany is okay, well, why we started this, because John wasn't able to be here. I thought that I would invite Bethany to join us, since we are talking Portland. Yes, Bethany is okay, and she has more stories to tell with us. So let's go ahead and bring her on right now. Hello, Bethany. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me on.
Surprise.
We are also good. Welcome back. So we were just going over our thoughts on the Proud Boy events alone. Some of the things that Aaron had to deal with, as far as having a Confederate flag waved in his face and things like that, as well as our thoughts about them calling for an end to the event and telling everybody to wrap up as soon as they were made aware that there was people coming. All of those things. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? Because you stayed after, you were there till the very end too, weren't you?
Yeah, I was there pretty. Definitely, again, intimidating for me, especially since after I got assaulted. I think I said in the last video, I kept trying to get a little close. I basically stayed on the outskirts for the rest of the day. But every time I tried to approach, they saw me, screamed Antifa press. There was one point where a guy, of course, twice my size, which could be anyone, let's be honest, got in my face and, was screaming at me. So the whole time, once things started to disperse and I went back in the crowd, that was a little intimidating for me. But aside from that, not a ton happened. I wasn't really sought out for the most part. People recognized me, were watching me, but I wasn't approached too much. One interesting thing I did see was that the Proud Boys had taser shields, and they were showing those off kind of near the end of the rally when they thought Antifa was going to show up.
Taser shield? What's a taser shield? Like a plastic shield?
Yeah, so they're homemade. They're actually starting to be distributed into the police departments with the police force, but you can make them. So you take copper wires and you make an electrical circuit. And so when you hit somebody with the shield, it also can electrocute them. And so they were showing theirs off, and they brought some to the rally as well.
Okay, that's interesting. I
Wow,
did
I'm gonna
not
have to
see
look
any of
that
that.
up.
What was that?
I'm gonna have to look that
Aaron,
up.
it's not a toy, Aaron.
No, I'm not gonna make it a toy. Just that's crazy.
Yeah, I was a little surprised. And of course, that limo that had Wolf on it, I know that they're a Seattle far right group. They were distributing white plastic shields to everybody. So they were
Gotcha.
arming up for an attack by the time everything started to disperse.
But yet at the same time, the leader told everybody to wrap it up and clean up after themselves and to leave because that's not why they were there, which is an interesting conundrum, so to speak. And I talked about this a little bit with Bethany the other day when we were on a live. I'm going to let Aaron tell the story from here. You're muted, Aaron. There you go.
I know. Yeah, this part of the trip, needless to say, was the scariest part of the trip and the part of the trip that also pissed me off the most. Here I am, a black guy, and I know I can be mistaken for Hispanic or whatever, Tongan, Puerto Rican, whatever you want to call it. But here I am as a black dude going to a BLM protest and being asked to say Black Lives Matter to prove myself. I mean, like, are you out of your mind? Why would I not think that my life matters? Why would you? And mind you, there really isn't a black person nowhere in sight. There is nothing but a bunch of college-age white kids just everywhere, okay? And we're just walking in the park. We hadn't said nothing to nobody. We're just walking and observing at this point. This little white kid, skinhead, bunch of tattoos on his face. Do you support BLM? Are you a fascist? And as soon as he said fascist, I'm pretty sure John turned in Iron Man and Captain America at the same time, because that's when John decided that he was ready to fight, pretty much. So it became a really, really tense situation for absolutely no reason. There was all this aggression and all this anger and all this name calling. Patrick got called a dog whistle because of the 13 stars and the number 76, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I was trying to follow along on that conversation, and it just kept deteriorating. And so eventually we all split 3 separate ways. Pat went one way with 2 or 3 of those guys. I went one way with another couple of those guys. And then you could just hear John in the background, Constitution, Constitution, flag, flag, American Eagle, flag. The whole time. And it was just really, really tense. At first there was 4 main people who walked up, and then all of a sudden there's 20 people surrounding us, and they're literally not just walking up to us. They're trying to entrap us in a circle, and they did. So their whole movement makes no sense to me. This Antifa BLM thing, the BLM movement's lost. It's gone. It is nothing but a bunch of little punk kids that want to sit there and take control over something on a platform that they can use that's relevant right now to do as they please and as they want. They look disorganized, but they also seem organized at the same time, because what I saw is several different areas where it was just a couple of them. You know what I mean? And they were pretty strategic. And the way that I look at it, there was a heavy presence on the main street. And as you walked in the park, as you got further in, there were people watching you as you go. And that's how I think that they followed us. I know Patrick said that the skinhead kid with all the tattoos on his face. Didn't you guys make eye contact at some point in the beginning?
No, what I saw when we first got there and I got out of the car, obviously I have a hat that says 76 on it with 13 stars. And it's a hat I wear almost every day. But one of the men one of the really aggressive ones that surrounded us was watching me get out of the car, and I hadn't pulled a mask up yet or anything like that. So, I mean, I have a beard and I have all this other stuff. And like Bethany says, I look like a Proud Boy. And I think that was the assumption that was made. The dog whistle thing, I saw in the comments, somebody was asking about it. Apparently that's like a silent signal to let other people know with the same ideology that you're with them. So like they saw that 76 and the 13 stars as a representation that I am a racist or fascist or whatever. I don't know what assumptions they made about me. I can't speak to that. And, Aaron, I do agree with you. I think, if this is how people who show up to BLM events are treated, with that level of scrutiny, I mean, it wasn't like they were just asking questions. I think they surrounded us with the intent to do harm. They made that pretty clear. But I don't know that that's a representation of the entire movement. I don't know that that's a representation of everyone, because Portland is one of the hottest cities in the country right now for this stuff. And I think we're seeing some of the worst in people right now. And that's just the truth of it. I've gone back and forth ever since we got back, man. I've gone back and forth and back and forth. And that particular group of people that we dealt with obviously are misguided, obviously did a whole lot of stuff very, very wrong, in my opinion. And I don't think they're helping their cause at all. And, the first time I went to Portland, I walked away with the feeling that the movement, the cause was lost. And at this point, it wasn't about that anymore. It was something different. It had turned into something different. And that is really unfortunate. Claudia, you are right. That is true. There are not a whole lot of people of color in Portland. But I will say this, we saw, we've heard reports, and we saw what happened to Bethany firsthand. We've heard reports of other attacks on the other end, and we got treated the way that we got treated in an entirely different event. So, at the end of the day, I'm going to stand on the same thing that I always do, and that is that violence is wrong. Violence is wrong. Threatening people is wrong. It is not how we are supposed to treat each other. And it's definitely not how we're supposed to act in a civilized society. Now, when I say we're dealing with the worst of people, the police apparently confiscated, a bunch of, things for, these BLM protesters or Antifa members to, projectiles. They had condoms filled with human feces and urine and a whole bunch of stuff. And the Portland police tweeted this out themselves, and so that's awfully frustrating, because that's not the way to peace. And, like Bethany, you were talking the other day about how there's no leadership, and without true leadership, how do we move this forward for that, for that particular group of people? And unfortunately, it felt like watching the events unfold for the weekend that, the cause is lost, and now it's just a fight, and, and it's just people looking for a fight. Do you agree with that? Or what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, kind of going back on what you guys say, after being assaulted at the Proud Boy rally, and someone actually got video of it. That's on my Twitter. But we're starting to see, they didn't do the whole thing, but you can see the guy grabbing my helmet and trying to push me down. And then someone else trying to smack my camera out of my hand. But there's good and evil to both groups. And good and evil is not great of a term, because people are complicated. So we look at the Proud Boy situation, and I have a few people that assaulted and attacked me. And I have those people that went after journalists like myself and singled us out. And then you also have the other guy. I'm not quite sure if he was a journalist, but he got punched and kicked in the head and actually ended up with a concussion at the Proud Boy rally. So you have that on that side. On the other hand, there was a far right Trump supporter journalist that ended up contacting me today that kind of saw what happened and said, hey, I'm not going to apologize for these people, but I support your First Amendment right to be there. And sincere press, I think what happened to you was wrong. And even the people on stage that said, you know, hey, leave her alone. So you have two sides onto the Proud Boy side, but you also have that on the BLM Antifa side. I've been up to Portland many times throughout the last 6 months. And I can tell you that for the most part, a lot of the mainstream media has been lying, and that's why I'm an independent journalist. And so what you see in these photos is you see the riot cops on one side and a big fence dividing up, and then the protesters on the other side. And what most people don't see is behind that, there's a cotton candy machine. In fact, multiple times when I was in Portland, there was caramel corn stands, or there was a whole bunch of Black-owned businesses that would pop up and sell like jars of candy. And I ended up buying from some of those businesses, and they were handing out pizza from Sizzle Pie. So those are the things that aren't really covered, and the things that I try to show as well in these situations about how complicated things have been. You know, there are the instigators. I have seen people throw glass bottles at police. I have seen people throw fireworks at police. But I have also been tear gassed and have protesters running up to me trying to pour water in my eyes to try to help me. You know, I've seen protesters that just come and give out donations and also help the houselessness problem or homelessness problem in the area, as well as support the movement. So I think that while the message is lost, and of course we talked about that last time, and how there needs to be a leader, not just for Portland, but for the United States, for the movement. You know, if they want this to succeed and they don't want public opinion to change as much as it already has, then they need at least a list of demands. They need, you know, they need a statement of what they're about. And then they're also going to need a leader, someone that is going to stand up. You know, they need a Martin Luther King before a Malcolm X. And that's what we're seeing right now.
That was pretty deep. I like that last part.
Yeah, thanks.
Apparently, I can't
No,
talk
that
when
was
I'm muted. But hey, guys, John was able to make it after all, so he is here joining us now. So let me pull him up on screen.
There you are, buddy.
Hello.
What's going on, Mr. Lee?
I want to be the first. I want to be the first to say real quick. I was gonna get in my car after the show and come find you.
I apologize. I was actually stopped by this new extremist faction. They're the Proud Zifa boys. It's kind of, they're confused. They're both liberals and conservatives. They're actually moderate independents, and they inconvenience you by forcing you to sit down and compromise with other people. And if you don't, they hit you with bricks. So it was really weird. There was a big protest circle. I'm kidding. Yeah, so I apologize, guys. I was actually having some technical difficulties earlier. Yeah, no extremist group protested my computer, so luckily we're good that way.
I was about to look it up. I'm like, I haven't heard of that group yet.
That's a journalist for you right there. I'm telling
Yeah,
you.
I'm like, you know, is that in the New York Times? Can you send me the link to that one? I want to check it out.
And no Fox News, please. And no Fox News
Now,
links.
John, real quick, I want to give you a chance to catch everybody up. We've gone over our experience at the Proud Boy event. We talked about the flag event. We talked about our general impression when we showed up there, and we've started talking about what we experienced at the Peninsula Park event as well at the BLM event. And I'd like to give you the opportunity to share your side of that story and what you saw in that and your thoughts on it as well.
Well, okay. Without degenerating into curse words, I see I see in both places.
Hey,
I
John.
saw.
No curse words. We're streaming to YouTube. Come on now.
Oh no, I get it. If you want the curse words, just watch the reflection. Beats gives them against my will constantly. What I saw in both areas is that there were two kinds of attendees, and we saw the security that was around the Proud Boys, right, which was mostly militia run. We had guys that were protecting the border and making sure that if anything got out of line, obviously they were there to stop that, to protect people, to protect the rally, etc. I didn't like the experience I had in the BLM protest, but when I'm looking back on it, I'm realizing that's exactly what Antifa thinks when they're at these damn things. If you think about it, when we were surrounded by those people, there was basically two kinds of people. There was the BLM protesters who were in a motley different colored clothes. They were the ones that had no justice, no peace. They were the ones that had Black Lives Matter clothes, things like that. Then we had what was clearly Antifa, and these were your what you've seen as Black Bloc Antifa. So essentially what they are is they're dressed head to toe in very black clothing that's very tactical looking. Some of them had armbands that were red. That was kind of a reminiscent, scary symbolism there. And they were the first ones to leave after everything de-escalated. So once we got to the point where we were actually talking to some of the BLM people, they just muttered some horrific things under their breath and left. And I've been thinking for a long time that, the reason they left was because of what we were saying. And now that I'm thinking back on it, I don't think that's the case. I think that these extremely aggressive, misguided people are there to protect, so to speak, the protesters. I think that was their horrific idea of screening that we went through, and it's their idea of weeding out anyone that would cause a lot of harm. Because if you remember, they were very concerned about whether or not we were armed. They really wanted to know what our intentions were. They were afraid that we were Proud Boys. They were afraid that we were Trump supporters, whatever else. But that always came back to this idea that we were violent, that we were going to be violent when we were there. I was yelling very angrily. So I definitely seemed like someone. Beats is laughing. So I'm sure that I could have been interpreted as somebody that was violent. I don't excuse their tactics at all. I felt like I was surrounded by Nazis. I felt like I had been transported back in time and I was literally fighting, fascists. I was dealing with extremist ideologies. But given time to reflect on things and to go back and think through, I think that's what they think their role is. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because it keys into the organization that we see. It keys into the way that they have been using their, I don't even want to call it screening because it's not. So basically when they scream at you until you accept first or verbally acknowledge certain ideologies or certain key phrases or certain things that they want. We saw that with Beats. They tried to force him to say Black Lives Matter. And Beats is like, why the hell do I have to tell you my own life matters? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But like, this was their kind of screening process. But we saw this with the Proud Boys too in a different way. When we went to the Proud Boys, the first thing they had us do was take a knee and pray. So everybody in the crowd in the rally took a knee and prayed. Then they had us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and we had to put our hands over our heart and do our Pledge of Allegiance. After we did our Pledge of Allegiance, they also made us take off our hats and listen to the national anthem. But if you think about the psychology behind this, what they're doing is they're making sure that there isn't anybody that kneels during the anthem present. There isn't anybody that refuses to do the Pledge of Allegiance. There isn't anybody that doesn't like God, basically. So even though that wasn't horrible, and since I'm a Christian and proud to be an American, it was very easy for me to pass that test, so to speak. I think when it comes down to it, it's like, if you are not one of us, we want to find out as early as possible. And then we want to react as passionately and as violently as possible. But it really wasn't, I always try to look at the psychology behind it, because I want to understand people, and I'm trying to look what possible reason or role does a group like Antifa have alongside a group like the BLM, because the BLM people, they were very angry with us at first, but they stuck around. They listened to us. They were the ones that said, hey, if we see anybody later that's giving you any guff, we'll try to tell them that you don't want any trouble, that you're not here to create harm. We'll put the good word out for you. Not that I really trusted that a whole lot, but nonetheless, that wasn't somebody that was dressed up like Antifa. That wasn't somebody that was flying a black and red flag. That wasn't somebody that was dressed head to toe in tactical clothing that was screaming at us. Those people were talking. And so when I'm trying to figure out what is the role here, I see that there actually is a hierarchy within this. There is a structure of organization that represents what I feel is the greater hijacking of the groups. And I think a lot of that is unintentional, but comes across the same way. When we talk about the militarization of police, this would be like the militarization of the protesters. This would be like the militarization of the alt-right, as far as they go into a more vigilante stance rather than just say guns for home defense. So I think when we look at it, that's the role they're fulfilling. Their tactics are arguably something that like the brown shirts or the SA used to do a lot. It's kind of this political bullying, essentially. It's political harassment. It's political strong arm tactics and stuff. But I don't hear Antifa actually pledging their own politics. I hear Antifa beating the crap out of me because I'm not saying BLM politics. They didn't ask me to say that Marxism was great. They didn't ask me to say, hey, I love being a socialist, or call somebody a comrade, or do any of the things that I have heard other Antifa members talk and explain that their politics are. They made us basically pledge that we were not a threat to the BLM, and then they left. And I mean, they watched us like hawks, and I have no doubt that had we not been such smooth people, and if we didn't have the protest whisperer, and also my new friend here, Black Panther, if we didn't have him as well, we would have been in a lot of trouble. But luckily they were listening and talking to us. And so that makes me feel like there are different wings of this bird. And I mean, I've always felt that there were different groups I've always spoke on the behalf of peaceful protesters just as being constitutionally protected. Even if I don't agree with what they say or whatever else, as long as they're not being violent, as long as they're not being criminal. But I really do think that's what this is. Like, I believe Antifa believes themselves to be like the people police or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they seem to have this idea that their authority is to check the people, to actually hold them in some sort of counterbalance within this protest structure. And to me, that makes it a lot more dangerous, because you get the wrong person behind that ideology and you essentially have a recipe for disaster. I know I'm going to have a hard time defending Antifa in the future. I pretty much have a bad taste in my mouth, but you know what? I'd love for somebody to prove me wrong. I'd love for somebody to come forward and be like, hey, Antifa is actually not a violent organization that takes on itself to enforce its own brand of justice on people. I would love that, because right now it looks like they're borderline terrorists. Now, I don't know if that's every single person that says I'm Antifa, or if that is just this organized paramilitary wing type style of thing that we see. And that goes for the alt-right too. There is groups that are just sorry, go for it, brother.
Oh no, I want to give Bethany a chance to respond. I'd like to hear what she has to say about all of that. What was your take, Bethany?
Yeah, there's definitely some stuff I want to address, especially as someone who is constantly watching and interviewing and documenting, especially the BLM and Antifa protests. The first thing I'd like to get to is, you mentioned how they were praying and then taking off their hats. I got that on film, and then posted the pictures on my Twitter of kind of what happened. I would like to say, as someone who is also religious, 5 minutes after they were done praying, they were attacking me. So what that looks like to me is what idol, what type of Jesus are they praying to? Because, you know, if you look at what they're doing, are they doing it for the right reasons? Because you can't say that we want to have strength in our hearts and to accept everybody, and then 5 minutes later I'm being thrown to the ground.
That's a fact. For the record, I'm a Christian, and I absolutely believe that in many ways Christ has been taken out of Christianity by the large group of people who call themselves Christians, and that the teachings that he had during his life were of mercy, compassion, tolerance, and forgiveness. He asked that you feed your enemy. He asked that you clothe your enemy. He asked that you do not hate your neighbor. So I would totally agree that that is completely unchristian, 100%. And I would totally believe that a lot of people wield Christianity as a weapon when it should not be. The reason I was talking about like it wasn't violent necessarily towards, I was saying to me as a right-wing Christian who, you know, stands during the anthem and things like that, you know, it didn't bother me to go through that, but I imagine for others it bothered them a great deal. And that's kind of the double-edgedness of that whole deal. On the surface, a lot of things on that rally seemed very peaceful and very productive, as far as, you know, they did a lot of lip service to things like unity and freedom and all these other things. But it's almost like what they didn't speak out against was even more loud. You know, for me, it's like you have to embrace it all. If you're if you're on a platform, you have to address the whole picture. So if you say, hey, look, I want peace, I want love, I want unity, then you also need to be preaching that to your people on a regular basis and making sure that they're not getting your message wrong or trying to do it in a way that's against it. Otherwise, you're endorsing it. I was kind of talking to Pat about this earlier, and it's like at a certain level of involvement, if you're not addressing the extremes, then you're kind of complacent to the extremes. So if you're not up on stage saying, hey, I don't want any racist shit today, I don't want any hatred, I don't want any of these things. Like if you're not addressing actual issues, if you're just speaking in vague generalities, and then you're not backing that up, practicing what you preach, so to speak, then it does make things, you know, a little early. Also, Shirley, I'm not defending Antifa. I'm saying if Antifa has a side to it that I haven't seen, which so far the Antifa side I've seen sucks, I'll listen to it. You know, if you can show me footage of a whole lot of Antifa helping, some stuff like that Bethany kind of referenced on some extenses, like that's fine. For me,
well, Bethany, go ahead.
Now I'm pretty considered it's violent.
Well, I'm actually here to kind of do that.
Excellent.
So I want to take the other side of the stance. And again, opinions out of it, I'm just going to tell you firsthand experience and facts. I'd like to say that when my video of the quick interview I did about 2 minutes after I got attacked, since then comments have come out of people commenting on my videos. One of them, and I'm going to quote here, is, "She is not an innocent flower. She is a professional terrorist that belongs in prison."
About you?
About me.
And you're good. I didn't see you coming. What agency do you work for?
Yeah, right. Multiple comments about that I was yelling about my assault, that I was lying. Multiple comments about how I'm Antifa scum. And I'm sure I'm going to get some death threats in the near future. So I have been called an Antifa terrorist. Now, I would like to state, I do not believe Antifa is a terrorist organization. I think that there's extremists on both sides. And I think that the more polarizing those sides get, the closer they are together. I think the far, far left and the far, far right are basically the same.
Yep.
And it kind of makes a circle of political ideology.
Yeah, one just defends against the authority of the municipality, and the other defends against the authority of the federal government.
And I think that I would disagree with you when it comes to the terrorism, and even the majority of them, because we talked about last time, we were talking about labels, right? So I was talking to Patrick earlier today. We called each other, make sure we were safe. And I just want to go ahead and look at some history and then some labels real fast. So if we look at Antifa, what does that actually mean? Because, you know, we see that Wolf, head of security, Department of Security of the United States, has basically made it a buzzword the last few months. And we see all these rumors about Antifa starting the wildfires. I can see that they did not, as someone who lives in Oregon. And I'll go ahead and send you some reliable journalists that have been covering that. But one thing that I can say is if we look at the history of the word Antifa, let's break that down with linguistic. What does that mean? So the word started to pop up, 1940s. We're starting to see that the Antifa comes from the word fascism, which was fascismo, created by Mussolini, who was a socialist in Italy, who then became a fascist dictator. We're seeing that word, that fascism means, the definition of fascism. So anti-fascism, you shorten that down, that's Antifa. Now people have started to take that name and started to put a personality behind it. I would argue that anyone who is not a fascist can be considered, by definition, just linguistics alone, Antifa. But of course that isn't the case, and we get into labels and we get into stereotypes. Now I can say that last night, which I wasn't able to talk about, I have some conservative friends that were with me at the Portland demonstration. So this was at the Justice Center, not Peninsula Park. Definitely stood out, and we're kind of on the sidelines. And I got to interview my friends, and they told me that they were approached by some BLM Antifa supporters because they were kind of just standing on the edge taking pictures. A little suspicious, I'll give them that credit. And so when they were approached, they were like, hey, what are you doing there? And definitely a little aggressive. And then my friends barked back and was like, why are you asking? And they quickly realized, oh, wait, this could look bad. And they said, hey, we're actually here with our journalist buddy. We have no intention. We're not a Proud Boy. And after both sides were kind of able to describe what was going on, quickly resolved. And they had no trouble for the rest of the night. Now, I've also seen that at the Proud Boy rallies as well, where I was immediately threatened, and one of another journalist, Sergio Olmos, they called him out by name, and they went after him as well. Aside from that, when we want to include all groups, kind of like you were talking about, when we want these groups to come together, like the article I'm writing, how the left and the right should work together, we need both sides to not make the other side hate them. You shouldn't have the BLM Antifa supporters making people say Black Lives Matter, because you don't want to join that group. You're like, that group is insulting and angry and threatening, and I don't want to be a part of them. And on the other side as well, you can't attack me as press and then tell me that you want to be a part, that you want me to join. So I think that both sides need to have more of an open heart and more of an open arms, and make it so that those who maybe don't originally agree with them want to join them, so that we're creating unity, so that we're working together. But as long as both sides continue to be aggressive, we're not going to get that. And that's what I'm beginning to see more and more.
That's a really, really interesting point. One of the things I've talked about on multiple occasions is the fact that we have to humanize the other side. It's really easy to see people as the enemy when we don't see them as human, and realizing that we have humans on both sides. Now, keep in mind, I'm very well aware of the fact that there is a lot of people on the far left and the far right that aren't wanting to come together at this particular moment, that do want violence. There is evil out there. There are people that are looking to do harm. And that is just the truth of it, and people need to be aware of that. But Aaron, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk. You've been quiet for a little bit, so go right ahead and jump in there, buddy.
So thank you. There was just something that Bethany said that just made me question the religious, like, kind of versus the fight topic that you brought up in the beginning. I personally believe that there is two different kind of BLM members, and there's two different kind of Proud Boy supporters. From what I saw, from what my experience was there in Portland this weekend, do you think that could be the case? Maybe that there is, you know, a little bit of hate sprinkled in both groups.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was going into. Is
Okay.
I believe that there is more of the right, you know, kind of like Patrick, who I met, who is more on the conservative side, I assume, right? I'll take that, you know, smile as a yes. You know, I have the far, not the far right, but just, you know, more conservative stances, where, like I said, that journalist came up to me who was a far right supporter that made sure I was okay and actually contacted me today. And then I have, you know, Patrick, who came up to me to make sure I was okay. But then I also had the Proud Boys that attacked me. So I think there's both on that side. I think as well as Antifa, there are those protesters who are there for the street battles. They're the ones that throw the Molotov cocktails that happened last week or the week before. But there's also those who I can say that I've talked to and I feel comfortable vouching for, that are there for the equality and the pain that they have experienced when it comes to the original killing of people like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, that have pain in their hearts and sorrow for what has happened, and they just want reform. And we can see that on the right with Ruby Ridge and Waco, and we see it on the left with Floyd and Taylor, and both sides are hurting. And there's authentic pain on both sides, and we cannot just ignore that.
I think they're fighting for the same thing. They just don't know it and don't want to listen to each other. I think it's a little too far to, I mean, for, you know, us three, myself, Patrick, and John, to get them to realize that that's not enough. You know what I mean? But I think one day that if they did realize that maybe it might stop a little. Maybe they might be like, all right, you know, we've come together as a team. Now let's come together in a different way. Or maybe it might get worse. You know what I mean? Like, I really think that for any of this to get better, our government needs to step up to the plate too. And what I'm leading into is this black plan, so to speak. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's $500 billion for black people. How do you think that is, like, how does that make you feel? I just want to hear like your thoughts on that plan and what it's going to do.
I haven't heard of that in enough detail where I feel comfortable commenting about it, because I want to be well versed in the things I talk about. So we could always do another episode about that later, but I don't know enough about it to have an opinion either way.
Okay, that's something that just popped in my head. I do that. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I just, you know, I would like to look more into it before I can make a conclusion about what my theory is, and even talk to more people about what their opinion is when it comes to it, BLM or Proud Boy.
So I'm going to jump in here. I want to wrap up my thoughts on the two different groups that we experienced before we get into the night itself and some of the differences that we saw out there. And that is that one of the things I'm getting kind of tired of seeing. There are extremists on both sides, you guys. The Proud Boys aren't all bad. Okay, I'm going to tell you that right now. The people in Antifa, they're not all bad. That's not how this works. There are people on both sides of this that are just good people that believe in their cause. Okay, there are people that are violent, yes. But if we take the most extreme of any group and we use that to classify the entire group, well, then we're using really generalized statements for a large group of people, and that is something that we try not to do in Breathe America all the time. So how is it different when we're talking Proud Boys and Antifa versus when we're talking Republicans and Democrats? You know, they're not all bad, you guys. That's just it, you know. And so I think it's important to realize that, yes, there are people inside of Antifa that are looking for violence. There's also people inside of Proud Boys that aren't going to do anything to stop that violence. In fact, they're just waiting for it because they want to be involved in it as well. That is the truth that I see on both sides. Does that mean that leadership needs to change? Does that mean they need leadership? Does that mean there's problems with their core values? I don't know. These generalized statements. Shirley says we must use generalized statements about Antifa. Why? Why, Shirley? Why do we have to use generalized statements about any group of people? I've met plenty of them that are not the monsters that they're made out to be. There is, and you're right, there is no understanding of the group and several of that stuff. And that's the problem. Until we have more information about the structure of an actual organization, it makes it really, really sketchy to classify all these people as terrorists or as some of the things that we've heard. I do think there's a lot of misguided people on all sides of these issues, you guys, and it's frustrating for me because ultimately we all want a better America for our children. I think that's a universal truth at this point. I want my kids to grow up in a great country, and I want them to have an amazing opportunities, and I want them to be able to live free, right? And I don't know a single parent that doesn't want the same thing. Aaron?
Agreed. I mean, there's that. This is a lot of this has come to me wanting to be a little bit more involved in these things because that is what is at stake, is a free and open country for my children. I'm not going to be here forever, and if the rate we're going, it's not going to be peaches and cream forever, you know.
Well, and I'd also like to add that, you know what, I stood surrounded by a whole bunch of people that represent themselves as Antifa that wanted to do nothing more than to kick my ass because I was wearing a hat, right? Because I had a hat they didn't like. That forced they're trying to force my friends to say things because they're standing next to me, right? Like, I'm going to tell you right now that those people, they don't have, like, the fact that we were able to have a conversation and walk out of that situation, I think we got very, very lucky. You know, just like there was, other people at the Proud Boy events that weren't as lucky as Bethany, that did get assaulted, that they were attacked and they were punched and kicked and got injured, right? Bethany, she was assaulted, but at least she got out without injury, right? So she was lucky. I think we were lucky too. I've heard other reports from independent journalists that, get badly beaten at these BLM events, right? And their cameras broken, their phones taken. And granted, these are all just reports. I can't factually say any of this. Is just the things that you hear when you run around in circles like this. But at the end of the day, you guys, we talk about this all the time. We are Americans. Now, I stand against violence. I stand against, people forcing you to say things like that. That's all BS in my mind, right? And violence is where we draw the line, and that is, or at least for me, it is. Ideology is just ideology. That comes and goes, and it changes all the time. So that part of Antifa that we ran into this weekend, straight up, I have no respect for that, and it doesn't for me. It makes it very easy to see why the BLM is losing support. If that's how people that are independent people that are walking into these events are being treated, it makes sense to me why they're losing support, and they're losing this battle in the court of public appeals, so to speak. But that's pretty much all I've got at this point as far as that goes. And I want to touch on something else because I think it's important, and that is that night when we were when we went back down to the protest down at the Justice Center and the courthouse, and like your friends, Bethany, we decided to stay on the outskirts. We decided to stay outside of it. Didn't really want to get too close, especially after the what we had seen from the other place. And so we wanted to see what we could see. So I'm going to run through the events pretty quickly. It was pretty calm. There was only one police officer there at the time when we first got there, and they were in a car that had a loudspeaker on it, and they had a repeat saying that they were going around about getting out of the street. They were warned several times to get out of the street and, exercise your First Amendment right from the park or the sidewalk. People didn't listen. Every time the car moved, the crowd moved with it. And then eventually the crowd moved to the opposite side of the park, and then we saw a whole lot of police roll in in massive number. And from somewhere, whether it's the police, the protesters, I really don't know. I know Bethany and I talked about this earlier today, comes the stormtrooper music from Star Wars, which was kind of crazy.
I'm pretty sure that was the police.
I'm pretty sure it was the police
I
too.
agree.
It was the police.
I cannot confirm or deny that, but from what it appears, it could have been bouncing off the buildings, but I did not see any speakers that would indicate it was a protester.
I did. You can see it in my live. I actually kind of zoomed in on that speaker. It was that same vehicle that was there initially in the beginning. It had looped all the way around to come up the hill, kind of, and it was like in between that black van and like another paddy wagon, and it was just kind of like off in the cut just a little bit. But it was definitely coming from that speaker, without a doubt.
Yeah, that's the LRAD. Yeah, people are calling that DJ LRAD.
DJ.
If you don't know what the LRAD is, it's a very powerful sonic weapon.
Yep.
It's been mostly had a ton of criticism that's gotten banned, so they mostly use it as a loudspeaker, but it was known to cause deafness and even burst certain things in your head. So they stopped using it, and now they just use it as a speaker.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then we watched what unfolded, and it was a short time later that it was deemed an unlawful assembly, and we made the decision to leave at that particular moment in time. I saw several people get arrested, some quite forcefully. But I want to speak out against some things that I saw in other live streams that night, and some other things that I saw as well. And then I'll give each of you guys the opportunity to talk as well. There was a lot of video out there of this last weekend where we see police charging the crowd with nightsticks out, beating people, assaulting people, and then not arresting them. So I want that to sink in for a second. I want you guys to hear what I said, and I'm going to say it again. We saw the police in multiple cases charge crowds of people, hitting them with nightsticks, assaulting them, knocking to the ground. I saw a police officer kick people on the ground, and I got to see these things on live video streams myself. And then the police pull back, and these people get up and take off running. So they're literally assaulting people without the intent of arresting them. And I want you guys to think about that for a second. And I understand a lot of us support the police. Hell, I support the police. But I want you guys to think about how you feel about a police force that is willing to go out and assault American citizens without the intent of arresting them. Personally, I have a problem with this. I have a big problem with this. I don't like it. I think if you need to use those kind of tactics to get to gain control of a situation, then it better be with the intent of arresting people. I think to assault people like that without the intent to arrest, which is clear that they did not have the intent to arrest, I think that is wrong on every single level. And I don't see that as riot control, Bree, if that's what your comment is for. I see that as just sheer aggression for no purpose. To break up a riot, I watched them do that earlier in the night. I didn't see this at the park. I saw this on other live streams and other locations. So I don't know. I'm curious to know how you guys that are watching feel about this. And Aaron, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor. What are your thoughts on that, on the things that you saw in the other live streams and that stuff?
I didn't see the other live streams yet. I do have a full-time job. So I haven't had a chance to check out the live streams. However, I have seen the media, and from what I've seen on Twitter, on Facebook, on just random searching stuff on Google and then other stuff popping up, it is not really portrayed as what I saw. They made it seem like that it was police attacking people for like no reason. And that was based on like how they showed the pictures of people with like, spray on their face and people washing it out and stuff like that. So there's that aspect of it. Um, and actually, I really want to thank you and John for going with me, because initially we weren't going to go, but I felt like for me, it would have been mission like incomplete. You know what I mean? Going to Disneyland, not getting on Splash Mountain, so to speak. So I like had to go see with my own eyes. And, at first it was like, well, this is lame. This is not even, nothing. It's just them yelling. There's this dude talking about, the king and queen and how he views the queen. And it just really didn't make any sense to me that, everybody's saying all these things are going to happen. And then we heard the loudspeaker. And I was like, oh, there it is. And then we start making our way towards there. And then I listened to that loudspeaker and I'm like, well, I mean, that's really nice. At least they're giving them an opportunity. And I haven't seen down 3rd Avenue yet. You know what I mean? Like, we were still trying to keep our distance. Well, I was personally trying to keep my distance from the BLM Antifa supporters just based on what happened before. I didn't really want them to hear what I was saying and what I was talking about, because I know they don't like cameras. But once I realized that other people are having cameras out and stuff, we kind of rounded that corner. And then I see that they were blocking the street, and I'm like, well, man, they are really not listening right now. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thoughts that I was having in my head. Like, why don't they just get out of the street? There's this whole park right here, with no one in it. I mean, even the park that they were in, there was plenty of space for everybody to be there, but they just wanted to block the street. And, out of nowhere, just vroom, vroom, cars, lights, police, they're like running in droves, doing that crowd control thing. And my mind was in just like complete shock and awe. Like, it was like the police parade, man. You know what I mean? Like, I've never seen that many police like assemble in aggression. You know what I mean? Some dude was screaming the redcoats were coming. So it was really hard not to laugh at that, because I thought that was pretty hilarious. And then there's the Star Wars music playing in the background. I didn't know what to look at. I didn't know what to film. So my mind was like, all right, when are they going to start shooting tear gas? When are they going to start shooting rubber bullets? Because that's still going off in the background that they're threatening to do that. And so my head was like on a super serious swivel. And then, like, I want to touch on what you said that you weren't comfortable with, Patrick. I actually kind of got afraid for a second, because there was this one dude who, there was this one guy, it was a police officer. He looked like he was occupied, and I had to start moving closer to you where you were sitting next to that pole. And he looked like he was coming over to come fuck with us. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I'm the one who did it. He looked like he was coming to us. And that was scary. That was seriously scary. He looked like he was like, all right, everybody else got somebody to beat up. Who am I going to beat up now? That was the whole vibe that I got from that whole situation, is that they were either in their locker room or wherever they get ready, and they were just pumping each other up, doing that brother fraternal thing, and they just came in hot, which I in some aspects I understand, but in some aspects I'm also like, that's not cool. You know what I mean? You're making people literally afraid of you, but you don't want to do that at the same time. So I don't know. My whole feeling about that was just it was a lot of mixed stuff. And as soon as they said it was unlawful, first thing that popped into my mind, RICO felony. Let's go. We're out. And that was kind of just my whole feeling
There's
about
a
that.
there's a little bit of a conversation going on the side here about police officers feeling frustrated, and that's the reason why these things are happening. I don't take that as an excuse at all for this. Whether they feel like they can't do anything right or their hands are tied or whatever the situation is, your job is to serve and protect. And assaulting American citizens, those that you actually swore an oath to serve and protect, is not acceptable. I'm sorry. Assaulting another American, an American citizen without the intent to arrest, it is one thing if you're going in there to arrest them and it's hostile and they're fighting back and they're resisting and you guys have to use, a higher level of force in order to gain control of the situation. That is one thing that you are going to have my support with full-heartedly. Sending in 30 cops running at a full sprint at a crowd of people just to beat some ass, that is not what we want to see. That's not what I want to see. That's not okay. I'm sorry. That's just not okay. Frustrated or not, those kind of tactics are not going to help us solve these problems. If we want to sit down with police and have a conversation about like legitimate legal reform and things like that, like John always brings up, then, hey, and speaking of
John.
we can't have that conversation with police about legitimate legal reform if the people that we need to sit down with are running into crowds with nightsticks assaulting people. That's not going to help bring people to the table. Look, like, we need change. We need legitimate change on a lot of different things. But I'm going to give Bethany the floor. Bethany's got a bit of a story, and then John, we're going to go to you. And then we'll probably wrap it up. But Bethany is going to tell us her experience with that night with the police and everything else. So the floor is yours, Bethany.
Of course. One thing I just want to hop off of that was said is why they kept running into the streets. And I would like to point out the difference between a protest and a parade. A protest is using your First Amendment right to exercise whatever you're going to do. If you have permission to be in the street, it's just a parade. So they were protesting in that way. And a lot of times what I see in Portland is a lot of a game. I see the cops teasing the protesters and being like, hey guys, please don't go in the street. It's like sitting out a cookie for a child and telling them that you're going to leave the room and not eat the cookie. So they know what the effect is going to be. And then you see the protesters run into the street and, everything's quite predictable. And also everything tends to go on a schedule from when I've been in Portland. Once midnight hits, that's when things start to go down. And, when it did go down, it was 10 minutes till midnight. So I can say so far my predictions are pretty correct. My experience was, once it was declared an unlawful assembly, because the state officers, and I have a source who is a state riot cop that was up there as well, and we were texting back and forth. As someone who is then deputized, the charges that you're going to get is going to be a federal terrorism charge that the DA cannot overrule. So, of course, for you guys, that became dangerous, even as overlookers, not even as protesters. Is if they would have gotten one of you guys, that's it. So there's also a restraining order on press. So what that means is typically the police are not allowed to hurt press. So as someone who owns, press passes and is belonging to organizations that back me, I'm not supposed to get arrested. In fact, that is a huge thing. They're not supposed to get arrested. They're not supposed to be, attacked. They're not supposed to be, charged or anything like that, but it's quite common to see that. And last night, that was what I saw as well. So when they declared unlawful assembly and they rushed the park, I'm trying to film with the GoPro on my head, and then I'm videotaping on my camera. And I'm with my buddy Sam, who's also a journalist, because it's always good to have a buddy at these things. And so we're basically linked arm in arm, and they're coming up from behind us, screaming at us to run. So I'm holding out my press pass. I'm clearly identifying myself. And, And I don't run, we usually walk because I shouldn't have to run. I shouldn't have to run from cops. I should just have to, stay on the sidelines and do my job. So they continue to push us, and they were able to separate groups and like put us into factions at that point. And so different groups go different ways, and you see the cops, hop on the riot vans and start chasing. And nothing was too unfamiliar at the time, but then they start assaulting press. So I was with a big group of press, and all of us were identified. All of us had press either on bulletproof vests, helmets, our press passes out, backpacks. We were all very, you could easily identify us in a crowd. And so we're in a group at that moment, and they ended up pushing Sergio Omos, who is an independent journalist in Portland. They pushed him into a tree, and he ended up dropping his camera. I have the last few seconds of them pushing a press down to the ground and him trying to scrabble up while we're obeying orders, because as press, when they declare an unlawful assembly, I'm still allowed to be there. When they declare a riot, I'm still allowed to be there because I'm not a protester, I'm press. So they end up throwing some press to the ground, and then they start hitting us with batons, not in an aggressive, over the hand type of way, but starts nailing us in the back a little bit, trying to get us to move. And we're all saying, hey, we're complying, we're press, but they just keep going after us. They end up tossing a press into a wall. And then something really, really upsetting happens is there is a blind journalist. And so she's blind. She has her walking stick, and she has 2 visual guides with her, who all 3 of them are press and certified. And I watch them start to shove her into a wall. And she's screaming, I'm blind, I'm blind. And I watch her keep throwing her into walls. And I'm just watching this in terror as this is happening to her. And then they start charging us, so I have to turn around, and I start hearing this scream. And I just hear screaming, saying, help me, I'm press, I'm press. And they start yelling her name. And it turns out they grabbed one of her visual guides and arrested her. So they grabbed the blind press journalist guide and ends up arresting her. So she's calling out to the blind journalist saying, I'm trying to find you, I'm trying to find you. And so I ended up following up with her after the arrest. And I have pictures of her being arrested and stuff. And she's in a bright yellow neon vest that says press. And from her accounts, the police officers take off her lanyard with her press pass and start declaring her that she's not press, which is horrifying. The fact that they would take that away from her. And so I quickly turned on my phone, got a quick interview with the journalist, and she's like, I'm visually impaired. I have 2 visual guides. They just stole my visual guide from me. And they ended up arresting her. And so you have someone that has, an impairment that is being treated this way. So we keep getting pushed, and they ended up pushing a journalist so hard that he fell on top of me. And so I get trampled to the ground, and I get back up and keep moving. And they push me so hard in the back, I fly a few feet. And the whole night, they just kept assaulting us. There's a famous journalist, I'm forgetting his name right now, but I'll go ahead and send you guys information, but he's 73 years old. And for no reason, they threw him to the ground that night. And he hit his head pretty hard, and he's physically okay. But they threw him. They also trampled a pedestrian that was quite older as well, that I got on film. And so and again, there's multiple live streams coming out and videos coming out of protesters just being thrown to the ground but not arrested, or the arrest being so aggressive that doesn't seem just. We've seen live streams in the past of them arresting people and then like punching them in the head while they're on the ground with 5 officers on them. We see this overuse of force even on the people that aren't supposed to be used. And luckily you guys got out of there when they said it was unlawful assembly, because if you hadn't, the effects would have, you would have seen what I deal with, to say the least. You would have been in my situation where I put myself in. because as press, I'm not doing anything wrong. I have the legal right to be there. I have the constitutional right to be there. And I'm being assaulted by police. So that was kind of more my experience. You can see some of my videos and stuff I post on my Twitter, but you know, this is why I need to get a bulletproof vest, is not because of the protesters. It's usually because I know I'm going to be brutalized. I know that they're going to use oppressive force on me, regardless of who I am, even if I have the legal right to be there. But that's kind of my experience from the other night.
That is that's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, and it's but the thing I think that we all need to know and we all need to see in all of these things is that this is what is actually happening, you guys. This is the truth. Now, whether you agree or disagree as Americans and, you know, as people that seriously talk about you know, what needs to change, you know, stories like that, it's heartbreaking to hear. It really is. John, you speak out more about this stuff than anybody here. So I am really like, I can't wait to hear what you have to say. So brother, the floor is absolutely
yours. A comment.
Oh, absolutely.
The reason I follow Antifa pages on my Twitter is to kind of find out where these rallies are. I am an independent journalist that tries to take a moderate stance on everything. And I usually keep my opinions out of it unless I'm doing an editorial or anything like that. I also follow some Proud Boy accounts as well, mostly to just see where these rallies are going to be, what their views are, and what's going to happen that night in Portland or anywhere across the country, whether it's Oregon, Kenosha, Alabama, New York. I like to see where things are going, so I follow both sides. Same reason that you can watch CNN and Fox News and come to different conclusions is why I follow both sides, Antifa and Proud Boys.
Thank you, Bethany. John, the floor is yours, brother.
Okay, so are y'all familiar with this little document in American history called the United States Constitution? Okay, that is the document that is on trial here, period. That is the document that is on fire here, period. All of this, we can argue about the tactics of Antifa or argue about the tactics of Proud Boys or Trumpers or anti-Trumpers, the left or the right or anything else. But what everybody needs to universally recognize is that the Constitution itself is actually what's on trial here. So if you look at it, the First Amendment, which is what a lot of this is something that we talk about quite a bit when it comes to protesting, things like that. Just let's read it off real quick. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This is what's always bothered me because as a conservative, I look at things like the Malheur National Refuge. I look at the cattle standoff with Ammon Bundy. I look at Waco. I look at Ruby Ridge. No matter what, conservatism has this history of recognizing that A, we get spun in the wrong light by propaganda constantly. The media portrays us a different way. The feds portray us a different way. So when we look at this whole entire scenario, what we see is that essentially when you look at the Proud Boys want to, you know, tout how supportive they are of not only the First Amendment, but the Second Amendment, right? Because the right to bear arms. When we look at what the DNC and the GOP come out and they say things about specific amendments, they only speak on specific amendments. They don't speak on the Constitution as a whole, because the Constitution as a whole is actually our protection against an overreaching authority, all the way from municipal, all the way up to federal. So when it really comes down to it, the things that what we can classify as the alt-right or the far right that are angry about, they're literally angry about federal overreach of authority. Then when you look at the BLM and this area right here, they're upset about the overreach of the municipal authority. When you pair that with the fact that most of these protesters are actually asking for their Democratic leadership to step down as part of their protest, you realize that there's a lot of fractions here, and you're like, well, I don't understand it. If the left doesn't support Democrats, then why are they voting for Democrats? Why are the Democrats saying they support the left? Why, if the Republicans actually support the right, why are they favoring legislation that would impact the freedoms and the liberties of the right? And why do the right do that? And what it really comes down to is we're not getting represented on either side of this. The people have a right to request change. The people have a right to literally petition and assemble and say, hey, we are not budging until you give us some sort of change. That is our right through American law and through constitutional law. So when you see that, we're really getting hung up on, you know, is the left actually doing what they're supposed to, or is Antifa actually militarized? And to me, like, trust me, I got a bad taste in my mouth, even after what Bethany said. But it doesn't mean that I think that Antifa itself is this military organization or whatever. I'm just saying I acknowledge the fact that when you have a very, very small amount of experience, and that experience is all bad, it's hard to see what the bigger fight here. And the bigger fight actually is this march for domestic terrorism laws. Let me explain something. The left and the right are not going to be happy about any of the domestic terrorism laws that are being passed right now. Even though a lot of us are crying out for them because we feel unsafe, I want you to understand that they use terminology specifically in these things to inhibit our ability to actually protest in the future. We actually just saw a piece of legislation that's going through. They announced it in Washington, where they're talking about, it's basically the Anti-Riot Act, essentially what it is. And what they're saying is that once they declare an assembly disorderly, not just destructive, not just unlawful or criminal, but disorderly, that's the terms that they use. They can actually charge every single person in that assembly through the RICO Act with a felony as a domestic terrorist. Now, here's the problem. Last time I checked, looting and burning was illegal. Last time I checked, property damage was illegal. Assault was illegal. So is it the issue that we don't have laws in place that will protect us? No. The issue is we are not enforcing those laws. And what we do see is this general steady march to keep that fear amped up, to keep that hatred built, to keep that division as far as possible. They actually encourage it. You know what I thought was the most telling thing about the Proud Boys rally yesterday? The police presence. So when we pulled up, there was probably at least 15 or 16 squad SUVs lined up right across the whole one side of the fence of the park. And we had 5 to 6 people outside standing next to the SUV, police officers, and they were casual. They were kicked back. I literally seen cops with their feet up. They were relaxed. They weren't expecting any issues. As soon as we heard that there was a group of potential protesters, or Antifa as they were called, or whatever, BLM people that were marching towards that park, as soon as the police got this information, the police left. So we automatically assumed that they must have been going to like stop the protesters, right? They're trying to keep a division. That's not the case. They dispersed. Why did they disperse around a park full of fully militarized, armed people that have literally been talking for the last 2 hours about how they ain't afraid to defend themselves against no Antifa or no BLM? They were like, this is the last group you want unsupervised. You want to break this barrier because it will save lives. They believe that the Second Amendment is literally empowering them to kill protesters that come to counter protest them. You know, and not all of them are, this doesn't mean that necessarily they're all violent. I'm just saying that's the culture that we have in our country life is you come mess with me, I promise you are going to regret it. You will only do it once, son. And that's what we're taught as, you know, Northwest rednecks. You know, Pat, you come knocking on my door, you better keep knocking on my door. You come sneaking in my house, you're done. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you come correct or you don't come at all. But what we're seeing is this.
100%.
The police left. The police left. Why? Don't they understand how horrific that was? Or is it the fact that actually a populace that is so tired of the rioting and tired of the protesting and tired of the violence will actually beg for the police to save them? We'll actually, whenever we see these movements, we actually see a reinvestment of funds into the police department. We actually see a spike in their funding. We see a spike in their support. We see a drop in all those cases where people say, hey, I want, police to be accountable and everything else. We start seeing a rise in Back the Blue every time we see these issues. Right or wrong, that to me starts to sound like strategy. So when you incorporate what's going on with the right, what's going on with the left, what's going on with the police, and what the government is doing, we're actually seeing a steady march for them to remove our ability to challenge their power, period. Because it is we the people. We are a government that is governed by the consent of us. If we do not consent, you have no right to force us to consent to your government. And this is where it comes from, the illusion of choice. We believe that we have to choose. How many people are voting based on, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't, so I'm going to go with this guy for damage control. It's a trickle-down effect from the federal powers all the way down to the municipal powers that we're trying to eliminate the ability of the citizen to say, hey, this isn't right. It doesn't support the spirit of the Constitution. It doesn't support the spirit of the Declaration of Independence or what America is for. I want this addressed, and I will not go home until it is. And that is very soon going to be illegal. There could be a moment very soon in our future where this entire conversation is considered treason. I just want you all to know that. This is why I am a concerned patriot, because I don't care about the right and left as far as the labels go and the divisive. I don't care what the Proud Boys want. I don't care what Antifa wants. I don't want nothing. I want to be empowered by the United States Constitution. I want to retain my ability to speak out against tyranny and fight tyranny. I want to live in the America I know America is supposed to be, and I want to have that American mindset, that American freedom, and that American position of strength over their own government. And what we're seeing is that is going away. We have the Department of Homeland Security. We have the NSA. We have the FBI. We have the CIA. We have task force. We have national task force, federal task force, international task force. We have state task force. We have municipal task force. We've got enough task forces. We have enough authority. We don't need more authority. We need a better system for that authority to go through. And that doesn't mean that you, Beats, Patrick, me, Bethany, we are not the problem in this situation. We are not domestic terrorists because we are displeased with what the government is doing. And that is what they're going to do. Basically, the moment that you step up and say, hey, I'm not going to shut up. I am going to stand here. I am going to say this is tyranny, and I demand to have my day. Well, at some point in the near future, they'll be able to lock you up for that. That guy that was standing outside the White House had a protest for, what was it, 40 years?
38.
38 years he's been there protesting. That guy won't be there in 3 years at the rate these laws are going. I promise you that. And this is something that everybody really needs to think about, because this is no BS. You need to take in the whole picture. Bethany was talking about how multiple sources, getting multiple sides of things, hearing all sides of the story gives you a better picture. I totally agree. And when you put that picture together and flip it on its side, what you see is the complete stripping of your individual liberties against the government that governs over you in the name of national security. Don't vote yes.
Guys, we talk about lots of different things, lots of different times. And John, I just got to say, seriously, brother, that was one of the best explanation of what I've been seeing and everything else. And you are able to talk Constitution better than anybody else I've ever known. And here's the thing, you guys, whether you're on the right or whether you're on the left, like I've said for a long time, it doesn't matter anymore. Our Constitution is under attack. That is what is happening. And we who see it and who learn about it and who get to that point, cover that cup.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize until just now. I look like President Trump trying to drink water.
But as this unfolds, you guys, as you see more and more of this, like the things that we're pointing out to you guys, these things that we go to these protests, we put ourselves in harm's way to see these things, is because we need to know for ourselves what's actually happening. When we hear about legislation, and the legislation that John's talking about, it's been passed in what, 9 states already?
Yep.
9 states. 9 states.
Coming to a state near you, folks. Coming to a state near you.
I feel like
9
that's what they
states is already passed it.
isn't that basically what they employed at the end of the protest late in the night? That's pretty much.
Oregon doesn't have that law yet.
Yeah.
Oregon doesn't have that law yet, but that law is coming. And there's an interesting thing about, once they hit more than 50% of the states that you guys probably don't. Well, they don't need all 50 states. They need 26. That's what they need. And if they get 26, it becomes law for all of us. And this is something we see with like right to work laws. We see with this and that. But Bethany had something she wanted to comment on in response to something you had said, John. So Bethany, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, that was really good. I wanted to comment kind of what you said about the different police presences at the different rallies. So we see, the police at the Proud Boy rally hanging out. They had this white polo that said Liaison Community Officer. And I ended up going up to him and I'm like, hey, what's the difference between you and those cops over there? And he's like, no, I am a police officer. I'm just wearing this to look more friendly. And so I was a little shocked by that because I'm like, you want to dress up, want to look good. So he said, I just want to look more friendly. I'm wearing this polo, community liaison officer, to look good, to look friendly, like I'm a community policing officer, to look less intimidating, right? And then we look at the protest that night, and the Imperial March is playing while the police are storming in to assault press and citizens using their First Amendment right to protest. It's so polar opposites about how they show up to each rally. So I wanted to actually cite the source. So the FBI had an intelligence assessment titled White Supremacist Infiltration of Law Enforcement that was published in 2006 during the Bush administration and then again in the Obama administration. So they tend to do this in each administration. And what they found, and I'm going to quote here, is it raised alarm over white supremacist groups' interest in infiltrating law enforcement communities or recruiting law enforcement personnel. So they kept finding that these white supremacist groups kept trying to get into law enforcement. And there's also a statistic, I'm not going to shoot out the exact number because I don't have it on the top of my head, but that shows that a majority of white supremacists happen to also be local officers. Now, I'm not going into state, I'm not going to federal. I'm going into more sheriff, more local policing. So we look at the difference of what that FBI report came out and both the Bush and Obama administration said. And then we look at what happened, the 26th, and it's uncanny. We see them dressing up and going, howdy, folks, I'm just here to protect your right, especially since they didn't have a permit. They did not have a permit to be there. I have on film the liaison officer stepping in between two Proud Boys, one that was defending Antifa, one that was mad that his buddy was. And I have the video of the two men arguing and the officers walking in and having them say, hey man, we want you to kind of keep this calm because we don't want to have to break this up or kick you guys out of the park because you don't have a permit.
Oh.
So we see the police giving love, giving exceptions, wearing these polos, putting on a bright smiley face. Mind you, none of them came to my rescue when I got assaulted. In fact, I have not reported my assault to the police yet. And that's something I've been personally debating about because I have the pictures of who did it, but I don't know if I trust that much is going to be done. And then we look at the other side that night where you have protesters that have songs going on and they were cooking ribs in the middle of the park.
They were.
They had barbecues and cooking ribs, and you had just a whole bunch of people, mostly just making speeches, and there was no property damage done. And they show up with the Imperial March and come in because, and just a quick running off, I think that our police need to look like basically UK police. They need to look a lot less intimidating than they are, because we look at the type of people that want to be police are not the people that should be police. Is the people that come in, and yeah, let me explain that real fast. The people that come in and want to, this doesn't really count as a bad word, want to be badass. You see these people come in and they want to jump off those riot vans and come in and they want to defend the streets and everything like that, are the wrong people. The people jumping off those vans because they want to be cool because every cop movie from the 80s told them so, are the wrong people to do so. Because they're
Bethany,
not defending.
I gotta ask you, because you're saying that, I gotta ask you, do you think that works on the flip side too? Do you think that your average quote unquote American badass criminal has also watched a lot of movies and is glorified into that thing? Like, I feel like our whole society like builds us up for archetypes that don't exist until we build them. What do you think about that? Like, we create the system for Dirty Harrys and we create the system for the streetwise super dangerous thug. Because if you look into our media and everything else, those are the epitomes, right? The cop that doesn't wait for the bureaucratic red tape and cuts right through to the mustard to take out criminals. I don't need this sissy paperwork, chief, I throw it at there. And then you also have that same thing where you're like, a regular thug that gets in trouble is stupid, but a smart thug, one that builds a drug empire, one that builds all this other stuff or is lethal on the streets, that's the glorified archetype. Do you feel like those people that are jumping off that van are looking for that glorified thug archetype? Do you feel like we created these quote unquote self-made superheroes to combat self-made supervillains? Because America is nothing but excess. Even our criminals are excessive. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah. My response to that is, as we noticed, especially when it comes to serial killers, we'll glorify them. We'll make everything into a Netflix series that glorifies about how smart and handsome Ted Bundy was, which is not what we should be doing at all.
No.
We have seen different types of shooters. What are we doing that for? Okay.
I'm not sure. I didn't want to be left out.
I hope I did it, even though no one
I tipped the mic over.
Patrick tipped his mic over.
No one saw me, but my hands went up. I was like, why are we doing
this? And
Bethany's not even on video.
Yeah, that's how it looked.
Because I'm an idiot.
Going back to what I said, like, we're glorifying, and we've talked to the media has talked to school shooters, and it's like they wanted to make a historical moment. They wanted their names to be remembered, and we tend to glorify that. I think that, one law in the UK is that the police cannot lie to you when you're under investigation or when you're being interrogated. That should be the same thing here. And this is my opinion when it comes to these things. And this is where I have to say, with my experience, is we look at these scenarios where the cops just want to be badass. So they're playing the Imperial March and they head down and, they're going to keep those streets clean. There was no property damage. There was a guy cooking ribs. Nothing was happening. If they wouldn't have shown up, everyone would have gotten bored and went home. I talked to a protester. I was like, what happens if the police don't show up? And they said, oh, we all just get bored and go home. None of this would happen, but they show up with their really cool riot gear, with their awesome tear gas, and they start shooting off into the crowds because they got to protect their streets. And it's so badass. And then they want to start using this over excessive criminalization, then calling the protesters terrorists because everyone just wants a big story. Hero cop saves city from terrorist. Where really that wasn't the case at all. It was aggressive badass cop beats up blind visual guide who was press and doesn't do anything at all, and there was no terrorist there.
There's your headline.
And there's your headline. And that's going to get the clicks. In fact, my suggestion to all of the people watching is follow independent journalists. Follow me. Don't just follow me. Follow Robert Evans. Follow Sergio Olmos. Follow Corey Leah. Follow, I'm going to get her ad, but the blind journalists. Follow these people who are on the ground. Because the other night, I saw some news channels show up, set up their tripod, do a 5-minute segment, got 2 people to talk to them, and left before it was on the assembly. They don't know what's going down. Yeah, they don't know what's going down on the streets. The independent journalists who put their lives in danger, who get hurt, who get arrested. I have been shot at. I have been gassed. I have been pepper sprayed. I have had buddies with their arms cut open. Those are the people that are going to give you the real news. Those are the people that know what's going on. So support independent journalists. Support freelance journalists. Because they're putting their life on the line for that.
Beats, you've been quiet for a bit, so I want to give you a chance to respond to all these conversations you've been listening to, and then I'm going to wrap this up.
Yeah, not normally quiet. We all know that. You can put your cup down now because I know there's nothing in there. Oh, that's embarrassing. You guys were talking about how the different kind of, I guess, police presence at each location. Do you think that it has to do with just that, is location? Because I mean, the Justice Center and the Federal Building have been like the biggest hotspot for civil unrest. Do you think that because the Proud Boys were at a totally different location that didn't really have, I guess, historically civil unrest there, do you think that that's a part of the reason of why they came out differently?
No.
Why they leave, bro?
I think from what I've said, and like I said, I'm up in Portland pretty often. And I've also been around the state. You know, I'm Oregon based, but I try to travel. You know, being a journalist is really hard financially. So I try to do the best I can to get out of Oregon. But even in my experiences in Central Oregon, I have seen situations where the cops tend to favor one side than the other. And it makes sense why. You know, you have one side that wants police reform or defund the police, and then you have the other side that is worshiping the boys in blue. So if you're an officer, it would make sense on which side you would feel more relaxed with. It would make sense on which side you would favor. You know, there was this instance where I was in Prineville. I talked about this in my last feed. And the Proud Boys came over to the BLM, you know, protesters and started screaming in their face and ended up like assaulting somebody. And the person, so they assaulted a protester, and the protester pepper sprayed the guy that assaulted him. And then the protester got arrested. You know, and he had to get bailed out. There are situations where it looks very favored. And so, you know, the person that was defending themselves, you know, stand your ground, is the one that gets arrested. And that has happened in my situation where I'm covering protests all over the state. So I don't think the location was the issue, because that seems irrelevant. I think if the Proud Boys was at, you know, fancy Rose Garden Park or anything else, it would have been the same scenario. You know, because you have these people that support the boys in blue compared to the people that want reform, and reform is tricky and challenging, and you'd much rather chill out with the guys that worship you.
Facts.
Hey, Bethany, real quick, somebody's asking why you think, or why are some of the BLM and Antifa attacking streamers? They're interested in your opinion on that.
I am not aware of BLM and Antifa attacking streamers, so I don't feel comfortable commenting on it. If you guys want, go ahead and send me some articles or send me some of the things that you've been seeing, and then possibly
Absolutely.
in another feed we could discuss it. But from what I'm aware with the journalists I work with and the journalists I tend to shoot with and I know personally, I have not heard that happen. I personally have not been attacked or anything by Antifa or protesters. If anything, they're the ones that have poured water in my eyes when I've gotten tear gassed. So I cannot speak on that account positively or negatively. I'd actually prefer you guys to tweet at me or see if I can look into that, but I have no comment for that situation.
No, that's fair. I mean, I wouldn't want you to comment if you haven't been made aware of it. So, but yeah, it is something that I've seen other streamers get attacked and their equipment stolen and shut down and stuff like that. Look, you guys, this has been an incredible show. And to the audience, I know normally we engage with you guys a lot more when we have these discussions and we pull your comments up and we you know, it normally runs a little bit different. I don't want you to think that we weren't seeing your comments. And I mean, I know all these guys have seen them, and I'm sure we're going to spend some time going through and answering some of your questions. But this was a really, really great conversation. And there's a lot to take from this weekend. Violence is not the answer. I know that. But the Constitution is under attack, no doubt about it. There are things that are happening all around us that we need to start opening our eyes to as conservatives, as liberals, as independents. No matter what side you fall on, you have to understand that we are much, much stronger united and coming together. And if we can't find a way to do this, if we can't find a way to have these stories or to have these conversations and to actually put the truth out there, then we're in trouble, guys. Make no doubt about it. We are in trouble. They're not coming for one amendment. They're not coming for, the Second Amendment that we all love so much, that I love so much, right? They're not just coming for that. They're coming for all of them. If they can just simply declare at any moment, any group disorderly, and that makes you a terrorist, you guys, the Patriot Act was a huge step forward in us losing a lot of our personal freedoms for being spied on and watched and all this kind of stuff, and also opened the door for them to say an American is a terrorist, and we lose habeas corpus. We lose everything from the judicial standpoint. This next step that they're talking about right now, John threw the link up for you guys in the comments. And for those of you that wanted to see where this law is, this is the real deal, guys. This is the real fight. And if the left and the right can't put down the damn sword and open their eyes and see what's going on, we're not going to get anywhere. At the end of the day, like I said, they're coming for the whole thing, the whole Constitution. All you have to do is be in a group. A group is defined by 2 or 3, right? If you're in a group of 3 people and they determine you to be disorderly, you're now prosecuted as a terrorist under a RICO Act, and you lose all your rights. Your right to a fair trial, your right to an attorney, your right to a phone call, all of it. You guys, that's the implication. That's the implication that we're dealing with. And Bree, your comment right now, both sides have to bend? No, we don't. We just have to recognize that right now the Constitution is under attack. And it's time to put our differences aside. We'll pick them back up later. I have no doubt we will pick it up later and we'll get right back to fighting with each other because that's just what we do, right? Like, let's be real. But right now, the Constitution itself is under attack. We the people, the Constitution, our protection is under attack. And that's what we need to defend right now. That's what we have to do right now. And the rest of that stuff, I'm sure we'll get back to fighting about all that other stuff later. But for right now, we need to put it all aside and we need to come together and we need to start acting like we're Americans and treating each other with the love and respect and dignity that we all deserve and standing up for each other. We need to remember the oath at the end of the Declaration of Independence. It is about standing up for your rights, defending your rights, not just mine, but to defend your rights and your rights to say and do the things that you do. That is what our oath as Americans is. It is written in our founding documents, and I'm sitting here in front of you guys on this screen, and I'm letting you guys know that I am here standing up for your rights to be American. The First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Third Amendment, all the amendments, all of them, period. We have to defend our Constitution, you guys. It is time. plain and simple. Now, this went twice as long as we normally do, but I think it was a great conversation. I want to thank everybody. Bethany, thank you for being willing to jump on here and share your side of it. As always, nothing but love and respect. John Lee, when it comes to the Constitution, you know, brother, there's you, and then there's there's you. I love you, man, and I appreciate your work. And Aaron, watching you grow through this process and all the things that you've done and you've learned, and spending the weekend with you, watching you go through this. I mean, it's tough, man. It's tough. And I got a lot of respect for those that are willing to go and see it for themselves like you did. And I got a lot of respect for those that are willing to open their eyes and see the truth, right? The truth that is staring all of us right in the face. I love you guys. Have an amazing night. And remember, be better tomorrow than you were today. And I will see you guys in the morning for my morning thoughts. Peace.
Peace.